What's going on, everybody? TH back again with another video, and today I'm reacting to Todd McShay's latest NFL mock draft, and will give my grade at the end of the video. Hopefully you all haven't seen this just yet. You're getting your first reactions with me, but nonetheless, if you've seen this, let me know what you think about it down below in the comment section. Who do you think goes too high? Who do you think goes too low? What, of the latest NFL draft buzz intrigues you the most? Stock up, stock downs, anything you want to talk about, love to talk about it with you down below in the comment section. But let's waste no more time and let's go ahead and start talking about this mock draft. We start with the Houston Texans taking Bryce Young. To me, that makes the most sense. So 1 for 1 there, McShay. I think that's the right fit. He's my QB1, so all adds up there. Then we get to an interesting spot here with the Seattle Seahawks. If they have the number 2 overall pick, I think if Bryce Young's on the board, I think they might pull the trigger there. Let's say we live in a world where Will Levis is the number 1 overall pick and Bryce Young's there at 2. I could see that being something enticing enough for them to pull the trigger, but they sit at an interesting crossroad right now where it's like, what can we get Geno for, right? Can we get him at a decent price tag? Or do we tag and trade him and, he becomes a second round pick? So then we can go quarterback here at 2. And then, with that extra second, we're finding another edge rush. We're finding IDL help. That's going to be an interesting conversation. Really, I think it comes down to the contract negotiation for Geno. But let's just say in a world where they're saying, "Hey, Geno proved it. He's a guy we can win with." Let's say the Seattle Seahawks make the playoffs, and that's enough of a boost in confidence for Geno. Jalen Carter here, I think that would be a slam dunk ad. Literally, I'm coming on the heels of watching Thursday Night Football, where another team that ran the ball pretty well against Seattle, 100-plus yards on the ground for Christian McCaffrey. So feels like they could really use a guy there in the middle to kind of hold their ground, but also Jalen Carter gives you a ton when it comes to pass rush potential. So I think this is a step in the right direction there if the Seahawks decide not to go quarterback at 2. And then Will Anderson, 3 to Chicago Bears. I think they'd love to have Carter fall to them and be that, that 3-tech piece Matt Eberflus loves to have there on the defensive line. It's just been a staple of what he's done in Indianapolis and what he tried to do offseason ago with Larry Ogunjobi signing. Then he fails his physical. So I think Jalen Carter might be their preference, but at the same time, 1A, 1B conversation. You've heard 1,000 different people have this conversation. Is it Carter or is it Anderson is the best non-quarterback in this class? I don't think you can go wrong. So, in an offseason after you trade the Khalil Mack, I think this is a step right in the correct direction, I should say. Then we get to 4, Detroit Lions taking CJ Stroud. This is an interesting conversation because, if Carter and Anderson are gone, Detroit then might, I don't want to say be enabled, or they might have their hand called to take a quarterback, but I don't know. They're playing some good football. They're making a playoff push. It'll be interesting to see what they do with their quarterback situation, right? So, with Carter and Anderson off the board, I think that's the play, right? Yeah, I think you go quarterback here. But, Miles Murphy, Brian Brzee, maybe a Trenton Simpson goes super high. I think 5 is a little rich. I like him a lot, but that could be, maybe an option, or cornerback as well, of course, could be a need. So a lot of different directions they could go here, but I think if the top 2 non-quarterbacks are gone, then you just take your quarterback and see this rebuild to, hopefully its full potential, right? You made the Goff trade. You have him for 2 years now. Let's see what a potential franchise quarterback, and let's see Brad Holmes draft a quarterback, right? I want to see what his bias leans towards, and can that take this rebuild to its full potential? Then we get the Philadelphia Eagles taking a running back here at 5. Apologies, this is nothing against Bijan Robinson, but man, that's rich for a running back. So Kuiper even says it here. I'm not normally, the running back this high type of guy. And look, I'll make the case for it. I said literally in the Mel Kiper reaction I did last week that, Bijan's the best running back prospect I've seen since Saquon, and Saquon was the best since Adrian Peterson. And, maybe there's even an argument that Bijan's a better running back prospect than Saquon, therefore making him the best running back prospect since Adrian Peterson in 2007. I think there's an argument to be made there, which speaks to how good he is. So, yeah, I just think 5's a little rich, right? Especially when you have a team with 2 first-round picks. I get the argument, and I make this argument all the time, where you have 2 first-round picks. I don't mind one of those 2 being, at a position of lower position value, just because you have 2 swings of the bat. Maybe if you want to take a safe layup play, but somebody you think is going to be really good, just plays that, like what the Ravens did last year with Tyler Linderbaum. I think that was the right time to go low position value there at 24. Here, though, when it comes to that debate of when you should take that lower position value, I think it's easier to make that argument with the second of your first round picks, though, because then you're saying, in this case, Philadelphia got a player in the top 5 and a running back versus a running back and then whoever they took at 31. I assume they're picking at 31 with their other pick here in this mock for McShay. So I think that's an easier press release, to kind of put out. Not that obviously that makes a difference, but that's kind of how my mindset, thinks about it. So, top 5 value versus, a running back there at 31 against, running back in the top 5 and then whoever you took at 31. I think that's an easier argument to make. So Bijan's a stud, but yeah, 5, that feels a little rich. But, the Eagles are going to have Miles Sanders, Boston Scott both be free agents this year, maybe. And, Bijan's not just a running back. He's a true offensive weapon. Then we get to the Falcons with Will Levis. And, we're about to figure out what Desmond Ridder is. He gets his first career start this upcoming weekend. So excited to see that. But yeah, this next 4 games, I guess, will make or break the conversation for the Atlanta Falcons in the front office of, are we in the quarterback market or not, right? If Ridder shows it, then okay, no, we're good. We can go best player available. But if it's quarterback and a Stroud's there at 6 or a Levis is there at 6, that could be enticing. So, they're going to be a really interesting team to watch this year. And, speaking of teams that could be in the running back market, I don't think here at 6, as a Bijan spot, but top of the second round, Jahmyr Gibbs could totally be in play. Sean Tucker, maybe. So, another team that could potentially be getting a whole new backfield next year. Again, we'll have to wait and see what Ridder looks like over the next 4 games. Then we get to the Colts, Peter Skoronski. This is another team where, Stroud's available, Levis is available. I think they pulled the trigger. Peter Skoronski, in this case, hey, that's an upgrade there at left guard. Potentially left tackle the future as well. So, got some flexibility, got some options there. I think Bernard Ryman started to pick it up, gotten better with some time. So I think there's reason to believe in him moving forward. But yeah, I think quarterback's really the play here. Edge, certainly an option. Brian Brzee, that the interior spot. Miles Murphy there on the edge. Either one of the Clemson guys, I think, adds up here. You could invest in the secondary. So a lot of different options for a team that, has plenty of holes in the roster. So outside corner, edge, IDL, offensive line totally makes sense. But I think quarterback is really where Matt Ballard or Chris Ballard, are going to be really looking for in this draft. Then you get Tyree Wilson here at the Raiders inside the top 10. He's one of these prospects where I think just about everybody's on the same wavelength of he's probably going to go in the top 31. Just where, right? Mid first round, late first round, early first round. McShay's got him in this early first round conversation. I tend to be in that, 12 to 15 range with Tyree Wilson, but, I can totally understand why the Raiders would want to make this move. Chandler Jones has not been a great signing, unfortunately enough. And Wilson could be that guy that gives you some flexibility to play inside. I think he can also kick outside to play, edge, but there's also people who see him as a 4-3 DN. So, he's going to be an interesting prospect. I think there's a whole lot more to be learned. For the Raiders, offensive line, I think makes sense. Corner could be in play here. But if they want Tyree Wilson, I wouldn't doubt that pick whatsoever. Paris Johnson Jr. to the Steelers. I've made this pick 1,000 times over, so no complaints here. Dan Moore, he's had some games where he's run blocked okay, but when it comes to pass protection, he's been a mess. He's also one of the most penalized, tackles in the league. So, yeah, I think if you get that left tackle spot, and it could be interesting, almost kind of like what Tristan Wirfs did with the Bucs a couple years ago. I think if you add the right piece to that offensive line in Pittsburgh, the rest of the O-line's play will be kind of bumped up, and it all in all just starts to look a little better. And, especially if it's at left tackle and a player like Paris Johnson Jr., who I think has a sky-high ceiling, I think that could totally be the missing piece. The next thing you know, everything kind of falls rank and file into its right place. So, love Paris Johnson Jr. there at 9 for Pittsburgh. Brian Brzee to the Cardinals, Arizona's such a tough team. In a lot of my mocks, I tend to go edge and corner, but interior offensive line, interior defensive line are just as big a need. So just, more position value when it comes to edge and corner group. But if they took Brian Brzee here at 10, a long-term play because eventually J.J. Watt's not going to be playing football, so replacement option there. And also Zach Allen's played some good football this year. Pairing him up with Brzee, I think, would be a really nice, pairing there in the middle. And then you still, you have some time. This is a deep edge group. Maybe you can grab a guy here in the second. Maybe Cam Thomas or Majay Sanders takes a step forward next year going into year 2. So you're still keeping some options open, but I think it's still a position you can address. So really like the IDL play here, and it's one that hopefully I'll work in my mocks moving forward. Carolina Panthers going Anthony Richardson. He's the ultimate X Factor wild card. He could go as high as like the top 5. Right? It just takes one team to fall in love with him and be like, yep, that's the guy we want. Trade up and kind of do what San Francisco basically did, get to the front of the line and say, hey, we want Trey Lance, or hey, we want Anthony Richardson in this case. Or he could not go in the first round, right? I think he ends up going in the top 31 just because potential. But here at 11 could be a really interesting fit. Obviously, this will come down heavily to whoever ends up being the next head coach, right? But, the argument could be made, hey, if they brought on a Ken Dorsey who got MVP Cam Newton, was a part of the process of developing Josh Allen, I could see that being the guy that says, yep, I want Anthony Richardson at 11. Or it could be the Giants in the 20s, now into the teens with, depending on how their season finishes. So, yeah, going to be an interesting prospect. But, Carolina, I think they need that quarterback. And this is a move where, especially if Anthony Richardson hits, this team's rebuild turns around in a snap of a finger. I think it's going to take some time for Richardson, but given how high of a ceiling he has, if it really does work out, you already have DJ Moore in place, you already have Terrence Marshall Jr., you already have an offensive line that's feeling like it's come together. Kim Aquana feels like a superstar left tackle in the making. So Defense is good. This is one of those things where it's a gamble, but if it pays off, Carolina can be scary for some time. Then we get back to the Houston Texans. Michael Mayer, I think this play makes a ton of sense here. I tend to go wide receiver with the other pick, but it's hard sometimes to find where Bijan and where Michael Mayer are going to go in these first round mocks, because they're going to probably go in the top 31, but because of position value, it's hard to find that right place. I think Michael Mayer to the Texans makes a ton of sense. Nick Caserio, all those New England heads kind of in the front office now with Houston, they're kind of thinking about that position maybe more than others. And it's a pass catcher, it's a weapon for your quarterback you just drafted, so it makes sense from that perspective too. So I like that pick a lot. Then we get Quentin Johnston here at 13 of the Jags. I tend to lean towards maybe wanting Jordan Addison a little bit more, just because I think Addison can give you a little bit more in the intermediate parts of the field, that 10 to 20 yard range, and he's a good deep route runner. For Quentin Johnston, let me say his name right. I think he's a yak machine, and then somebody who can win down the field with speed, size, and body control. But this guy is a force miss tackle machine. So I kind of think of Johnson as the guy who can work underneath and deep down the field. Addison, I think, gives you the option of a guy who can work the intermediate and deep parts of the field, which I think once you add a Calvin Ridley, you kind of already have that deep route runner. I'd like to see someone who can win in the intermediate parts. Now, granted, you have Christian Kirk, you have Zay Jones, so maybe I'm going down a diatribe I don't need to, but if they add another weapon in the mix, I will be happy. Whether it's a tackle to help make sure Trevor Lawrence is staying upright. Now, granted, I think pass blocking wise, Cam Robinson, Juwan Taylor have done an okay job this year, so maybe that's not really in their long term plan anymore. But wide receiver, offensive line, anything like that to help Trevor Lawrence continue to play like he has the last 3 to 4 weeks, I am all here for. So like the Quentin Johnston ad there for McShay. Myles Murphy, I think this play makes a ton of sense. And him falling all the way down to 14. This is about as low as I've seen Myles Murphy go in anybody's mock draft, which is interesting. But you talk about Rashawn Gary missing all of this year. Preston Smith's solid. I like Kingsley and Nagbery, and he might be good enough to where, hey, you got him on day 3 last year. He's proven to be a pretty good grader in the PFF system. He's had good production. He's gotten a decent amount of hurries, and he's gotten a couple sacks as well. So maybe he's good enough to where you don't really think you need a third pass rusher. But if you do, Myles Murphy at 14 is almost certainly going to be BPA if this were to play out the way it has. BPA, add that dude into a pass rush set with Preston Smith and Rashawn Gary. Wow. I mean, especially Rashawn Gary, Myles Murphy, 2 insane athletes, that could be dangerous for Green Bay. So I don't hate that. I think there's other needs this team can have, but, going BPA, Myles Murphy at 14, I think that'd be a great value. Broderick Jones at 15, I think this makes a ton of sense. You move Trent Brown back to right tackle. And there's minimal offensive line movement. I think in my last, mock draft, I did go offensive line here. I talked about maybe Michael Onwenu moving. Ultimately, if you did go Broderick Jones, hey, he's a left tackle, and you're going to move Trent Brown back to right tackle where he's played a majority of his career. It's really simple. It's really easy. So really like that. And it was actually Peter Skoronski who had my last mock. So, this guard tackle flexibility, I kind of almost just like the subjectivity or the objectivity of Broderick Jones is a left tackle. Trent Brown is going to move back to right tackle, and it's simple there. So, Isaiah Wynn probably going to be moved on from this offseason, so have a hard time thinking he's going to be back in New England for next year. So, I think that move makes a ton of sense. Then we get back to the Detroit Lions. Joey Porter Jr. Love this addition. So you get a franchise quarterback. Now it's time to address the defense, as McShay says in his write-up there. Long arm cornerback, and guy who's gotten better and better year over year at Penn State. Has the ideal size. I think he'll test pretty well at the combine. May not be in Keely Ringo type of territory or Jalen Jones from Texas A&M, but I think he's going to be a solid athlete, good wingspan, 6'2", good play on his tape. So love this, and I think he fits in really well as that mid-first round. Maybe even a guy who goes in the top 10. Then we get to the Jets. O'Cyrus Torrence. That's an interesting name to put here, because I guess the conversation would then pivot to, do you see Elijah Vera Tucker as a guard or a tackle? Because you taking O'Cyrus Torrence almost makes me think AVT might just become a tackle, move on from Mekhi Becton, and then it's going to be, a combination of George Fant, AVT, or maybe Dwayne Brown for a second year in AVT or something like that. And then you're going to let Becton walk, and then, your guard spots are going to be O'Cyrus Torrence and Laken Tomlinson. Maybe. I could see that, potentially. But again, the big domino there is, what are you doing with Mekhi Becton? Because otherwise, if you're keeping him, AVT is going to play guard. You have O'Cyrus Torrence. You have Laken Tomlinson. Maybe you can move on from that contract. Paid him a lot of money. Grabbing him from San Francisco. So potential. But don't hate this play whatsoever. Offensive line. For that run game scheme. The floor coming from the Shanahan tree. You understand the importance of why you need a guard in that system, and why that maybe matters a little bit more. So I could see that being a mid-first round need. But I look at the Jets, and it's also tough because the Jets roster is like a linebacker, a safety, and not a whole lot of glaring needs. The wide receiver room's taking shape. you're probably not going to get a great value at quarterback here at 17, so I don't hate that ad whatsoever. We get to the Seattle Seahawks, Brian Branch. I dig this ad a fair amount. This would probably keep Kobe Bryant on the outside, which, ideally, I think I've been talking about, Seattle adding another boundary corner. Kobe Bryant plays the nickel, but Brian Branch is this, box safety type, nickel corner, especially with, a safety tandem that already features Quandre Diggs, who's a really good free, and Jamal Adams, who can do a lot of different things. I think adding a Brian Branch lets you do that much more with Jamal Adams. Hey, you can pretty much keep him as an edge rusher if you really felt like you needed that for a game, or he can be an over-the-top safety. You can place him too high, and Brian Branch can be the guy that's roving around inside the box. I just think it adds so much more flexibility, and I love players like this. So big fan of Brian Branch, and I'm a big fan of this ad. And hey, minimum, he's a really good nickel corner. Hopefully year 2 bump from Kobe Bryant, who has impressed me as a rookie, and then him and Tariq Woolen are your guys on the outside, and all of a sudden that secondary is looking legit. And keep in mind, at number 2, they added Jalen Carter, so all of a sudden the Seattle defense looks pretty damn good. Tampa Bay adds Christian Gonzalez. I think this makes total sense. This feels like a Todd Bowles type of corner. Great size, great speed, really good man coverage ability, great hips as well. Yeah, I think this would be a stellar ad, right? And Carlson Davis taking a step back this year. I'm not really concerned about that. The game of the extension, I think you see that through. Quarterback can be a variable position where years it can come and go, right, with good play. And, for really good corners, there's degrees to how good they are, right? So I think Carlson Davis has kind of just caught, the raw end of variance, and plus, Tampa Bay kind of has in general. But, I think you ultimately let Sean Murphy Bunting walk. You bring back a Jamel Dean. I think Dean, Carlton Davis, those have been the two that over their 3-year sample have really impressed me the most. Add a Christian Gonzalez in the mix, and then you have some outside corner flexibility, and one of these guys can rotate into the nickel. Maybe it's Gonzalez as a rookie, just to give him some playing time, get him out on the field. So I like that ad. I think it's a position of high value, and it's going to be a need considering Dean and or Bunting are going to be gone this year. Murphy Bunting, that is. Jordan Addison, 20 to the Giants. This is actually a pick that I love. I haven't seen this a whole lot, but most of the time I have Addison gone by 20, but if he was there, this feels like a home run. I mean, this guy kind of even makes you think of Stephon Diggs, just from the perspective of wins with route running, can win down the field, solid enough athletic ability, right around the same size frame. Like, there is a decent amount of Stephon Diggs that you can extract out of Jordan Addison. I'm not saying that's my one-to-one comp, not at all, but there are some skill sets over there. So, thinking about Brian Daboll and, that scheme, maybe get Mike Kafka back for another year as the OC. I'd love to see what they could do with Jordan Addison being that wide receiver one. And then, my only concern then is, where's Sterling Shepard gone, right? He's been really quiet and, route running deep threat archetype. I think Addison can be that much better than Shepard, but, still it's like, where has he gone in this offense the last couple of weeks? So a little concerning there, but I think adding a wide receiver one in this offense, you get Wan'Dale Robinson back from the ACL injury. All of a sudden, that wide receiver room starts to feel like it's coming to form. Granted, quarterback's still going to be a question. Corner, I think, is a huge need here at 20. Corner and wide receiver are sneaky, big positions of need for the Giants going into this offseason. So I'm interested to see how they handle that throughout next offseason. Sticking to the NFC East, Washington Commanders, I'd love to see a Kelee Ringo addition, especially here at 21. He's still my cornerback one in this draft class. I just see the most NFL-ready traits, right? Like, the size checks as a box. He'll run in the 4.3s. That checks a box. Arm length, that checks a box. He played on a great defense at Georgia. A little bit better last year than this year, but again, cornerback play can be variable. So, to me, he's giving you an okay year this year and a pretty damn good one last year at Georgia. So I think there's enough good quality play on his tape. And he's gone against, wide receiver ones this year. I think, maybe that's part of the reason for a step back, but I think there's a lot to mold here. And, you're looking at Washington room with, Kendall Fuller, get a little older. Benjamin St. Juste has really impressed me a lot this year. So that outside corner pairing could be a really interesting one. You let William Jackson II go this year. So yeah, cornerback's certainly a need in my eyes for Washington. Then Jackson Smith and Jigba here at 22 for Tennessee. This would be interesting because then I assume Treylon Burks is going to be playing pretty much full-time on the outside when, a decent amount of it, the rhetoric around Burks last offseason was, one, the athletic testing, where is that going to clock in at? But then also, can he only play from the slot because that's all he did at Arkansas? Now, I think I've seen enough this year where he can be that outside number one possession guy and, almost kind of feels like a potential A.J. Brown replacement, maybe a little bit less top-end speed, but nonetheless, I think that potential is there. So then JSN going to factor into the slot. I think he ends up being, a slot wide receiver only. I'm starting to question if he can make that move to the outside. The athletic upside isn't all there. So I think this guy, features best as kind of this Juju Smith-Schuster slot wide receiver, wins with football IQ, finds the soft spots and zones, nifty enough route runner to beat man coverage, that type of role. I think that could fit. For Tennessee, it's like Robert Woods on the wrong side of 30. Yeah, you have Burks, but need more help there. I think JSN could be a solid add there at 22. Plenty of other areas they could go as well, though. Chargers, out of Cam Smith. I think corner's a sneaky need for this team, too. Asante Samuel Jr., maybe not past this previous weekend of football, but through the first 13 weeks, gave up the most yards of any cornerback in the NFL this year. That's concerning. Now, granted, again, cornerback play can be up and down, so maybe it's just a bad Asante Samuel Jr. year. Started out hot, but damn, it's gotten pretty cold pretty quick. J.C. Jackson, obviously, gets hurt. What does he look like in his return? So, Michael Davis is coming off the best game of his career, in my opinion, against Miami. So, we'll see. But, hey, if this team were to add another cornerback, I would not be upset by that whatsoever. And I think Cam Smith is deserving about it. It's interesting. I didn't mention this last week when we were talking about Kuiper's mock or Kuiper's big board, but, Cam Smith, kind of his profile changed from what he had been over the last 2 years versus what I saw this year. He had 10 penalties against him this year at South Carolina. He had 5 each of the 2 years prior combined. So that's a little concerning. And, part of that, once you become the guy, offenses can maybe start to pick on you a little bit. And you're starting to see wide receiver one. So maybe that's part of it. But he was kind of this guy who maybe a little bit less of an athlete than J.C. Horn, but he was also a little bit less handsy than Horn. Now you're starting to see the penalties, tick up, and it's like, okay, well, who are you going to be? So I've kind of soured on Smith a little bit. Still think he can be that late first round type of fit. 23, I don't think that's a bad value here for Smith, but he went from this guy who could potentially be in the top 10. Now I think he's maybe played his way out of that. Moving on now, let's talk about the Denver Broncos and Jahmyr Gibbs. I like Jahmyr Gibbs as a prospect, but here at 24, I think he could go late one, but yeah, just the fit there with Denver. Yeah, I guess he mentions Javonte Williams here in his write-up, but yeah, did we just forget about Javonte Williams coming back? I mean, that's a running back one in my opinion. I get you can have running back depth, but for Denver, you get the first round pick in the Bradley Chubb deal, so it's like, why not use that on something a little more valuable than a backup running back or that second running back option? So that's a little curious. Tackle, maybe another corner, maybe linebacker, interior defensive line, another wide receiver, anything really. That's a little bewildering. So I'm looking at this mock here for McShay, and I'm like, Bijan at 5, not really loving that, and Jahmyr Gibbs at 24. Not that 24 is bad, but to Denver, that's a little weird. So yeah, kind of questioning what McShay's doing here with the running backs. But anyways, let's move on to the Ravens here at 25. Clark Phillips III, I think that'd be a great add. Been one of the best players on one of the best defenses in college football. True shutdown guy for the Utes. And you look at Baltimore losing Marcus Peters after this year. Kyle Fuller down for the entire year with the torn ACL to start. I don't even think he played a single regular season game. Pretty sure that was in the preseason. So totally makes sense. Get younger and a little cheaper at that position as well. So this is also one of those teams that spends so much money on defense that it's especially with how much criticism is the right word, but how lackluster that wide receiver room, and the offense has been a little lackluster in general at times. So maybe starting to shift some of that free agency money and financial spending in general towards the offense a little bit more and trying to find that 50-50 state. Getting a rookie cornerback certainly helps you make you do that. Actually, a little bit of a run on corners here. We get Devon Witherspoon going to Cincinnati. I love this ad. You get Eli Apple benched at one point this year. Feels like the Bengals defense should be missing Chidobe Awuzie more than they actually are, but that point aside, still think they can get better, they can get cheaper, they can get younger at that position. On top of Chidobe Awuzie, who's been a great free agent signing since coming over from Dallas. Also, Cam Taylor-Britt's been playing corner, but still kind of the best thing he brings to the table is the ability to be a great tackler and be a thumper in the run game. So I almost think that I'm kind of doubting Cincy signs Jesse Bates long-term, so Dax Hill is probably your free safety of the future, and then Cam Taylor-Britt, I think, could fit into that strong safety role, and if you do that, then, boundary corners can become something you need to have, other assets to fill in. So drafting one here at 26, I think makes a ton of sense. Devon Witherspoon's been great at Illinois, so I would love that ad. Minnesota Vikings taking Zay Flowers here at 27. There's other wide receivers I have ranked ahead of him, but from one perspective, I can kind of understand this because, I'll start with other position groups. I think McShay does a great job here. John Michael Schmidt, center, I think totally could be in play here. Keep him in state. Drew Sanders. I have Trenton Simpson ranked higher as that off-ball linebacker, but either one of those two guys, I think the Vikings definitely get better at off-ball linebacker. But I think wide receiver is a really interesting add. Of course, you could add another corner, right? Add another edge too. Those are positions I typically put in my mocks for the Vikings. But wide receiver here, because let's say JSN was available, okay, that could work. But like I said earlier, I think he ends up being a slot-only guy. I love Josh Downs. I have him ranked higher than Flowers and JSN, but I think he's a slot only probably at the NFL level. So from that perspective for the Vikings, I'd like to see Adam Thielen become that new slot wide receiver just because he's getting older, starting to lose a step, trying to make his role a little easier. I'm moving him inside. So Zay Flowers gives you the ability to play outside. And Phil Jarovic's been, living off the Zay Flowers lifeline over the last couple of years at Boston College. His numbers are gaudy, so I can totally get it. And I think he did get a Senior Bowl invite. So I'd love to see what he does in the one-on-ones, and that's going to be a huge proving ground there for Flowers. That's the type of event that, bolstered the stock of Christian Watson and Jalen Tolbert. Both went on day 2. So it'll be interesting to see how that affects Zay Flowers. Then we get the Bills. Antonio Johnson. I think I'd love this from a value perspective. Also, he's such a unique safety, right? There's not a whole lot of 6'3", 200 at the safety position going around. So adding him to the mix, Micah Hyde, I don't know if he plays football ever again. That was a scary injury earlier this year. Poyer's been banged up. So DeMar Hamlin, I think, did an okay job in fill-in duty. So you already kind of have some built-in flexibility. But again, if Hyde doesn't come back, then you still need that third safety. Antonio Johnson, I'm really interested to see what his testing comes in at, because, to me, I think he fits in really well as that nickel corner, strong safety hybrid. But, if he runs well enough, the 3 cones at a high enough mark, free safety could totally be in play. And then those 2 high looks playing that split safety, role, I think that could totally be in play as well. So especially in Buffalo, where you get a whole lot of that split safety, I think he fits in there well. I think he could be that strong safety rotating down the box. And, Teron Johnson, if anything were to happen, I think he'd be more than serviceable filling in the nickel spot. Then we get to the Dallas Cowboys. Lucas Van Ness, not a name I've actually talked about a whole lot on this channel. It just kind of feels like a typical, Iowa defensive end, lazy scouting here, but wins with power. And actually does have pretty decent foot speed, and actually that's exactly how McShay worded it. So glad we're kind of in unison there, saw the same tape. But, that being said, the guy right here that goes 30, I'd have ranked higher than him. And there's other edge rushers I'd have ahead than Van Ness. But, hey, we're still early in the process. It's only in the middle of December. So by the time we get to April, maybe Lucas Van Ness has jumped. A Jared Verse, also, Isaiah Foskey comes to mind, Felix and DK Ozama. So maybe there is some movement there, but hey, for Dallas adding another edge, maybe that frees up Micah Parsons to a little bit more off ball. At this point, I'd like to see him stay at edge, but adding this type of guy with good strength on all those stunts and twists, be interested to see how maybe you could use him, bringing him inside and just kind of pushing guards into quarterback's laps. That could be a fun, kind of addition to the offense, but also, how long is Dorrance Armstrong going to be around? Tank Lawrence too, what are you doing there long term? So just kind of preparing for the future. I think this pick makes sense. But that being said, I do have Jared Verse ranked higher, so I'd love to see the Chiefs add him. Plus, just the skill set, playing off of George Karlaftis, who they drafted in the first round last year. This guy who wins with power and his hands. Adding a Verse who wins with speed and bend and flexibility, I'd love to see that. An ability to kind of pick on tackles and maybe struggle with one of those skill sets versus the other. But also, I just love Kansas City and the idea of we spent 2 first rounders on defense last year, but we're not done. Pat Mahomes is going to win us games with the offense. We need to make sure our defense is holding up their end of the bargain. So, adding, more edge depth. Carlos Dunlap's, obviously on the wrong side of 30. So, getting that potential edge rush duo of the future, I think makes this team really scary, especially when you consider Chris Jones there in the middle of those two. So, love that addition there at 30. We get the Philadelphia Eagles taking Isaiah Foskey at 31. So, again, I think, I think I would lean towards, going BPA in the top 5. Maybe that's Myles Murphy. Maybe that's Brian Brzee. And then, maybe it's Jahmyr Gibbs here at 31 instead of Bijan Robinson. But I still think, Myles Murphy and Jahmyr Gibbs is a little bit more appealing than Bijan than Isaiah Foskey, at least in my opinion. But let me know what you think down below. But hey, if they were to add a Foskey here at 31, I think it's a great fit. I think he could have been a late first rounder last year. I think he's a perfect, hand in the dirt 4-3 defensive end. That's exactly what Philadelphia's going to run. They like to have, a deep stable of edge rushers. I think he would be, a nice plug and play option, give you a good play right away. But maybe they can even tap in the future and his potential in the future, just because they do such a great job of developing that position, for the most part. So love to see him added there. And, as a Notre Dame fan, I think that would be a good spot for Foskey to land. So that's going to do it for, I guess, the 31 picks. Best available on day 2. Andre Carter, I didn't even think about him with the edge conversation. He could totally be in the mix. Keon White, same kind of thing. Love Josh Downs. Love me some Siaki Ika. Wish he could have gone in the first round here. And then Drew Sanders. Also, Trenton Simpson, another off-ball linebacker that did not go in the top 31 that I like a lot. Have him ranked just ahead of Sanders, but Sanders, I know, has a ton of fans. But that's going to do it for this Todd McShay early NFL mock draft. If I had to grade it, the running back picks are a little questionable, but other than that, I don't think McShay did too terrible of a job. I'll go with an 87, B+. I'll give you a B+ there, McShay. But tell me what you think of this mock draft down below in the comment section. What would you grade it? You can go A, B, C, D, or F, or you can go as specific as the number. Whatever you want to do, that's fine with me. But let me know what you think about this mock. Any draft talk you want to have, I'd love to talk about it with you down below in the comment section. If you enjoyed today's video, be sure to hit that like button. If you're new around here, want to see more draft content, hit that big red subscribe button. But that is going to do it for me. Hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. And until next time, my name is Teej, and I'm signing off.